Lando Norris has opened up on the rivalry against him and Verstappen, expecting it to boil over in the next 10 races, as their friendship will likely take a huge hit from what's happening on the track. With McLaren now having a consistent front-running challenger, but being unable to capitalise on a lot of mistakes and drop-offs from Red Bull, could Norris and Verstappen create a lot more Austria-like scenarios in the remainder of the season? And if so, who will prevail victorious in these duels after all the statements that have been said from Norris? It's safe to assume that Norris won't lift off the gas pedal in 2024, just because he's lost on so many points in a couple of races this year, having the fastest car on the grid but not being able to win. Regardless of that, Norris is now focusing on the fight with Verstappen and erasing the 78-point deficit, which doesn't seem like a possible scenario if we to look at how McLaren handled the entire situation in Hungary, where they forced Norris to give up the lead to Piastri just because they messed up their entire tactic and effectively stripped him of 7 additional points. However, with McLaren now being very close to Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship, the goal might be to focus a bit more on the drivers' category as well and expect the unexpected. And when talking about this entire situation, Norris was aware that there are a lot of chances that he and Max will end up crashing a lot more than what they did until this point. Furthermore, he said, "I expect to crash more in the future with different people, with Max. Not because it's an expectation that I expect to crash with them, it's just that those scenarios and circumstances always happen. With another 5 or 10 years in F1, you're going to have those situations at some point. Of course, this affects the friendship of drivers outside of the track, and there's a huge chance that both Verstappen and Norris's relationship will stray away, because fighting fiercely on the track and crashing would be too big of an elephant in the room for you two to fly in the same plane back home." While Norris himself said that these crashes would happen a lot more in the foreseeable future, he also insisted that they wouldn't play too big of a part in how he and Verstappen act outside of the track. Adding further to this matter, Norris said, "What I do out there, outside of F1, is a different world. It's a different life. It's a different mentality. I don't even use the same brain here versus what I'm thinking during the race when I get my helmet on. I couldn't care less if I played paddle with somebody last week or went out for dinner with someone. It doesn't change what I want to do on track, which is to win. If anything, it makes you want to beat them more, rather than less. For me, it's just 2 different worlds, and what I do away from the track. How I act and the people that I'm away with from the track couldn't be any further apart from my mentality of being a racing driver and being inside the car." Of course, this was a subject of many F1 experts, as Norris was warned that in order for him to look at the challenge from Verstappen differently, he needs to step away from the role of being a good friend and just focus on what's happening on the track, rather than nurture something outside of it. While this generation of drivers is a lot different in this regard, it would be interesting to see whether these friendships between rivals are something that could come back and haunt a driver in the Drivers' Championship. But with how everything changes so fast, and with how drivers are now being dropped off teams and picked up by others, being an enemy with a team or a driver could also affect you negatively if your current squad decides that you won't be racing for them anymore. But if Norris wants to keep the momentum going for him, the most critical thing is that the strategies as well as the self-criticism need to change from the side of the Brit, as well as his team. If we look at what happened in Canada, the exact same scenario that granted him the first career win only in a reversed way, we would understand why McLaren might just want to think twice before they call their driver into the pits, or in this scenario, think quick on their feet. Apart from that, the team was also the only one in Silverstone at the ending stages where they could choose a fresh set of all types of rubber available, and they ended up choosing the medium, which turned back to haunt Norris, and instead of finishing P1 and catching Hamilton, he finished P3 behind Verstappen. The most painful occasions in which Norris lost points to Verstappen are likely Austria and Hungary, as well as Spa. And while he took down 8 points from Verstappen's lead in Hungary when he finished P2, he was leading the race and was forced to give up the lead because it was his teammate who led it for the majority of the course until that point. This was, of course, quite controversial because Norris did nothing wrong for the team to intervene like that. But nevertheless, the team made sure that McLaren is first and then its drivers. But in Austria, the crash and the inability of Norris to get past an aggressive and moving under-braking type of driver like Verstappen has caused an even greater gap to the lead, 10 points in favour of the Dutchman, while it could have easily been 8 more for Norris at the end of that race. And this is something that Norris understands better than anybody else, because if we look at Spa, this was supposed to be a race in which he would cut down the gap to Verstappen for at least 10 points, had the race gone exactly like it should. but after going wide in turn 1 and losing 2 positions, Dirty Air and DRS Train did their thing and Norris ended up finishing behind Verstappen, losing 2 more valuable points in the championship. Talking about the entire season so far, the Brit went on to say, "From a race point of view, there have been definitely some moments that I wish I could rewind, that I wish I could do a little bit better, but on the whole I feel like I've been a much stronger driver this year compared to last year, and to me, that is what's most important. Be that as it may, we must state the facts. Norris currently has 1 career win, same as his teammate Piastri, and same as drivers like Ocon and Gasly on the grid. To be compared to a 3-time world champion like Verstappen, and to challenge him more regularly requires a lot of discipline and work on yourself, which Norris is likely doing, but not to the extent that would put him in the same league as the Dutchman. There are now growing concerns that he's not even the best driver in his own team, as he is the only one on the grid to not have gained a single position in lap 1 throughout the entire season. He either kept his position or lost it after a couple of corners deep into the race, which is quite an astonishing fact for a driver of Norris's caliber. Even Lewis Hamilton went on to talk about the title challenge of Norris, saying that while back at the time when he was driving the McLaren car, he used to trail other drivers by 40 points, being 78 points behind a 3-time world champion and a generational talent like Verstappen is probably the biggest challenge in Norris's career. Elaborating further on whether Norris can catch up with Verstappen in the last 10 races, Hamilton said, "It's not impossible, but it is a very, very high, huge challenge and task, but absolutely not impossible. McLaren has 2 very strong drivers who are able to compete against, ultimately, currently, in the championship. One car that's really up there, doing a lot of the point scoring on the other side, so they've got something they can work with for sure." Of course, McLaren were quite adamant the goal here is to fight for both championships, and by utilising both of its drivers, Zak Brown wants to see them finish in the top 3, which is quite possible now that Piastri is just 10 points behind Leclerc for the fight for P3. But this could present itself as a huge challenge for Norris too, who wouldn't meet a cooperative teammate if he needs huge help in the Drivers' Championship, similar to what Perez is proving to Verstappen. Because if we're to look into it, Piastri is just 32 points behind Norris right now in the Drivers' Championship. Elaborating on the goals for the team in 2024, Zak Brown said, "Both of the championships are priorities, because ultimately, to win the Constructors, we need our 2 drivers to be as high as possible. I'd like to see both drivers in the top 3. We've got 2nd and 4th right now. The closer we get to the Drivers' Championship, the closer we'll get us to the Constructors. So we're going for both, because all points count." With all of this in mind, do you think that Norris and Verstappen would clash more in the following period? And if so, who do you think will leave the race with bigger damage? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now.